filming? We're on. Okay. Okay, so this extract is from the novel Fifth Business by Robertson Davies. It comes from early in the novel. What has happened is that the narrator, Dunstable Ramsay, has, in his view, caused the premature birth of Paul Dempster and the madness of Paul's mother, Mary Dempster. Now, he's done this by dodging a snowball that was thrown by Percy Boyd Staunton. In analysing this extract, I'm going to focus on guilt and the reality of guilt to the guilty person, and the way that this extract really creates a sense that guilt is something almost physically real, and therefore not to be brushed aside. It will need to be dealt with. Afterwards, I'd like to draw attention to the way that this extract is applying some Jungian archetypes in this exploration of guilt. First of all, this extract emphasizes that guilt is a reality for all kinds of people. Early in the extract, the second sentence says, "I was a Presbyterian child and I knew a good deal about damnation." That word damnation has connotations of guilt and suffering that is deserved because of one's actions and decisions. But it also, immediately afterwards, there's an intertextual reference to Dante's Inferno. Now, Dante is a Catholic, and it insinuates here that the word RC, colloquial, that abbreviation, suggests that Roman Catholics are very different to Presbyterians. However, Dunstable visualizes his guilt through a Roman Catholic text imagery, and this really draws attention to the fact that guilt is something very real for all kinds of people, and it's real. There's a simple sentence partway through this paragraph: "I was of the damned." This is a simple sentence, so it emphasizes in a very straightforward way that Dunstable is indeed damned. His guilt is going to lead him to suffering and torment. It also is written in a tone that's in a style that's almost biblical. It sounds like old-fashioned English. "I was of the damned." This is followed by the antithesis that such a phrase seems to mean nothing to people nowadays. To me, it was utterly real. And this antithesis between the idea that guilt is nothing compared to what it was for Dunstable, utterly real, emphasizes the almost physical reality of guilt, that it's not something that can be brushed aside, that it's something that needs to be dealt with. Throughout this passage, there's the repetition of words that have connotations of suffering that it is due to guilt. It tortured me, the word torture. Later on, there's the word tormented, and other such words. Imagery of torture and torment emphasizes not only is guilt incredibly real, but the suffering guilt creates is real. Another aspect of guilt here is that it's associated with sexuality. In the second paragraph here, which begins, "How healthy-minded children seem to be nowadays," that exclamation is followed by the rhetorical question, or is it just the cant of our time to believe so? Suggests that actually maybe children are not minded in healthy ways. Maybe they also actually deep down have this universal guilt that we all grapple with, like as part of the great, what's it called, universal unconscious. But it says, "But certainly in my childhood, the common attitude towards matters of sex was enough to make a hell of adolescence." This metaphor referring to hell again shows that guilt and sexuality are closely tied, and they create real suffering. an image of hell. In the paragraph, he associates this, the idea of guilt and sordidness with his own parents. In fact, he uses the metaphor that my parents were somehow involved in this hog wallow of sex. Hog means pig, and wallowing means being deep in something. His view here, through this metaphor, is that his parents have been involved in something disgusting. Sexuality is by nature disgusting. And if one thinks about it, ironically, this is what has produced Dunstable. That without the hog wallow of sex, Dunstable would have not been produced. So again, guilt is associated with sexuality, and Dunstable has to face up to it really closely. So Dunstable is the product of sin and is therefore doomed, but also, in a way, he has produced sin because he feels responsible, even though he's not sexually experienced, for a sexual act. He sees, here it says, that the birth of Paul Dempster is his fault. In fact, the hyperbole, I was more responsible for the birth of Paul Dempster than were his parents, shows that he sees Paul Dempster as being the product of a sexual act, which is, again, heavily associated with guilt. And there's the exclamation here in the minor sentence, and what a child. That's just 4 lines from the bottom of the page. Hideous, stricken, a caricature of a living creature. This triad, this use of exclamations in the form of a minor sentence, show that what Dunstable claims to have produced is something like a monster. And this is a Jungian archetype. The idea of a monster is something that is common, perhaps, in our myth and in our legend and in our dreams, the fears of what we face. But here it is a fear of what Dunstable himself has faced. In fact, in a twisted way, he is like a mother. He says that he has almost given birth to a monster. So not only was he, through sexuality, a created product of sin, and therefore doomed to damnation, he has also, in his own way, in his view, created something monstrous and hideous and grotesque. And so this adds to his guilt. The idea of a mother is central in Jungian archetypes also. And the damnation, or the image of damnation that Dunstable faces here, is that he is destined or doomed to great suffering, a kind of a hell. And over the page, at the top of page 16, the repetition of the words dreadful fate would overtake me. Part of the dreadful fate would undoubtedly be the rejection by my mother. So for Paul, hell is rejection by one's mother. And the sense of certainty that he will be rejected by his mother is shown in the adverb undoubtedly. With words like this, we get a sense of the inevitability of the punishment that will come, because the guilt that one faces is real to oneself. As readers, we might think that maybe Dunstable didn't do anything too seriously wrong, but I believe the point of this extract, with its imagery of guilt and the reality of it, in fact, it's so real, ducking back, that it makes him physically ill. In that first paragraph, it says, I pined and wasted. These are physical things that can happen. Pining and wasting means losing one's physique. And so this suggests that guilt is so real and so so much a reality for Dunstable that it's physically affecting him. So I believe this is one of the main points of this extract, is to suggest that what one faces in one's conscious or subconscious mind is completely real to us. Paul says, I could not bear the thought, but neither, sorry, not Paul, Dunstable says, I could not bear the thought, but neither could I let it alone. And this antithesis shows, again, a sense of inevitability and of suffering. He cannot bear it, but he is incapable of walking away from it. That's about all I have. Don't clap, well, you can clap if you like. Okay, I'll just stop that there.